I would love to welcome IC on stage, and you're going to be presenting a paper on the research landscape of ICT for sustainability, harnessing digital technology for sustainable development. I think that's a fabulous start into a session that is going to look a lot into the sustainable development goals and several aspects connected to that. Yeah, I have a mic. What? You can't hear me. I shall hold it closer. Does that mean I was talking to myself for the last 3 minutes? Darn it, I gotta start all over again. So you were maybe wondering about my pantomime on the chair. That was me saying I'm a tall Finn, and Yari is unfortunately sick, and he sends his regards, and that's why I'm stepping in for him as a session chair. So we're gonna have 4 presentations, short presentations, then a panel, and you know how that worked from yesterday, so it didn't matter that I did some pantomime up here, so you know what we're gonna do. Regie, can we get some slides up there, please? Thank you. The stage is yours.
All right, thank you. Just putting in the timer, because I like to keep time alive myself. So, hi everyone. My name is Aista Rogevičiūtė. I'm from La Rochelle University, and I work in partnership with the Square Research Center. This paper, this project, little project, has been done in collaboration with Vincent Courboulet from La Rochelle University, and you all know Lawrence Hilty from University of Zurich. So the title is, as you can see, the research landscape of ICT for sustainability. So what exactly we're talking about? So first of all, a little bit of context, a little bit of motivation. As you might have noticed, recently we have quite an emergence of different papers, academic debate when it comes to talking about ICT, digital technologies in with relationship to sustainability or sustainable development. All is good, very optimistic, very positive. However, that means that there are tons of papers, there are a lot of emerging new communities which talk or investigate the same or similar questions, but maybe from different perspectives. So the question we asked, how can we try and structure that research, that amount of research, in order to identify opportunities and white spots in this interdisciplinary research landscape, and hopefully allow different researchers also to bridge gaps. So we structured the paper in 3 questions. Again, it's 10 minutes, it's not much to present, so I do invite you to go and read it. But the first question is about, well, what do we talk when we talk about sustainable development or when we talk about sustainability? The quote, which I absolutely love from Lewis Carroll, when I use a word, it means just what I choose it, mean neither more nor less. So that's how it is with sustainability, right? And sustainable development. So in our paper, we argued that there are 2 different concepts, and sustainable development is a normative political concept, which basically means making sustainable use of the planet by people under the condition of intra- and intergenerational justice. What is justice? Of course, it is highly disputed in ethics, especially when utilitarian views are extended into the future generations, but here it is. That's currently in our paper, we adhere to this definition. And when we talk about sustainable development, of course, we talk so often about 3 pillars: ecological, economical, and social. However, these 3 pillars can give rise to a rather simplistic view that the goals are interchangeable, that the trade-offs can be done, and there is a new or a different, it's 2017, so it's not very new anymore, the donut economics model, which is a different way of looking at sustainable development. And the idea yesterday was already spoke about this concept. So the idea that we do have to try to live in the safe and just space for humanity, which means that respecting planetary boundaries and respecting some certain social foundations. We believe that this presents a little bit better social ecological systems view of thinking, and also what is an advantage of using this model, that at the front it's the well-being of humans instead of GDP as a main measurement. So that's for the first question in terms of what kind of sustainability, sustainable development theories we could use when we talk about ICT and the impacts of ICT. However, the second question is how can we conceptualize the various impacts of ICT on sustainable development? So actually, how can we, okay, so we selected sustainable development, a certain theory, but actually how do we talk when we talk about ICT effects? So probably most of you know there is first, second, third order. There are different discussions. We are not the first ones who are trying to think and in terms of how we can structure the relationship between ICT and sustainable development or sustainability. Very often these discussions are focused only on the environmental side. So the more socio-ecological point of view is way less discussed in the literature. Here is the LESS model proposed in 2015 by Ilti and Abisher, and they talk about life cycle impact, enabling impact, and structural impact. So it does take into consideration both environmental and ecological, more or less to one or other extent. However, we believe that this model could be actually even more extended and elaborated, and especially when we talk about how we can structure the research within the fields of ICT and linking to the sustainable development. A couple of observations and more in-depth discussion could be found in the chapter. So first of all, well, there is certain misalignment of ICT and sustainable development agendas. When we talk about SDG goals, it's a rather techno-solutionistic view. The second point is what I said just before, that a lot of times we talk only about environmental side and forget social side, or it's the other way around. There are scientists who look, especially those who are looking in techno-critique, they look mostly in the social side and they do not take into consideration the environmental side. On top of that, what we argue, so in the donut economic model, we have in the middle that safe space, right? How can we go into that safe space? We believe that it is about decision-making. It is about how we govern the processes. What are the policies? What are the strategies? What are the values? So all that type of discussion currently is also not really existent in the current frameworks or models. And then the third one, there's all the question, okay, what kind of tools, how can we propose and how can we advance that interdisciplinary research or allow different type of research communities to find synergies between each other. So that's what we propose. In a nutshell, this is the idea. So on the vertical side, we have direct design enabling systemic effects. So they are based on the LESS model, which was presented previously. We did introduce a new layer or a new type of design effects. A quick note on enabling effects, we're not talking only about positive effects. It is in both sense. So it applies to all effects, but I think the word enabling can sometimes bring a connotation that it is only positive, but no way, it's basically, the idea is that we're talking about both. It's just about what are the effects from usage of the technology. And then on the top, so we have on the horizontal side, we have the idea of donut economics brought in. How does it work? So when we talk about different type of effects, in our research, do we talk about impact to society? Do we include impact to environment? Or actually, do we talk about decisions? Again, processes, strategies, policies, how we make those decisions in order to stay in that safe and just space, and how those decisions, strategies, the governance processes, how they impact society and environment. So the third question which we asked, okay, so we arrived with some kind of conceptual model. Can we actually try and explore how it could be used? So what we try to do as a exercise, so it's only an example, right? But trying to map some research communities on that ICT4S landscape and see where it takes us. So that's 8 examples. In no way we are trying to be exhaustive in this list. But the idea is, well, it is complicated. It is complicated, it is complex, and it's based, the position here is based, of course, on our for a subjective view, but also on the literature review. It depends. We looked into existing systemic literature reviews proposed by the communities themselves, where that existed. But for example, ICT and ethics is like, it's a big blob, because it's very difficult to identify what exactly a community it is. But the idea is basically there, right? To say that, okay, as a research community or as a researcher, when I'm asking my certain question, what exactly I'm trying to cover? What type of impacts on what? Is it possible that I could or we could bridge a gap and go and look for maybe ideas, answers, or collaboration with other different researchers? So as I said, this is not an exhaustive list. It's just an example. There's also, we hope that if researchers use this and position themselves, it could help to structure the landscape, which is becoming more and more complex for everybody. And it could help to bridge certain communities as well. And maybe we haven't explored that further, but so maybe it's a next step to explore if we could actually also find potential research gaps. So if we look into particular theme which interests us, can we find that all these little boxes, they are filled by some kind of research existing, or is there something where it's underdeveloped? Can we go further there in order to foster that discussion between ICT impacts on sustainable development? So final thoughts. So the donut model, we believe it allows to integrate sustainable development agendas with human first when discussing ICT effects, or well-being first. Nature is there. The existing academic discourse tends to, unfortunately, isolate ICT impacts to society from impacts to environment, and to overlook the impacts that occur via the changing decision-making policy strategy process. And the proposed ICT4S model could help to bridge research communities and may be useful in screening for potential research gaps. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That was really nice and insightful. Lovely. We have time for a question. The first arm was up already before I could say we have time for it. Please go ahead. And then we had a second one here, and that's about it for this round.
Just a clarification question. I didn't understand the middle column where there were decision making and why there were arrows to the side.
Because to answer it simply, maybe impact to society column and impact to environment, they look at the question what we are talking about. We are talking about what type of impacts, right? The question on the decision making column is more about so what. So the question is there, okay, so we take those, who are the ones who are taking those decisions? Who are the ones which are creating that type of impacts? So to give maybe a more concrete example, we can look at direct effects impact to environment, right? So we are looking, okay, so from usage of data centers in this location, what are direct effects on the communities? What are the direct effects on the environment? So that comes to the impact to environment. In the decision-making column, that would be how do we make actually other frameworks, models by which we decide how to make it, how to make a decision in order to choose the best location where to put the data center, geographically speaking, for example, what type of policies we should put in order to mitigate those negative impacts or bring in positive impacts. So the studies or the question which look as an example, into the frameworks of choosing where to put data center would be in the decision-making column.
Okay.
Thank you. If we have a clarification question, we can take a second question. Can I ask you to take this microphone to answer it and then invite Vijanti up to set the
Can I
slides up?
unplug it?
Yes, please, unplug. Yeah.
Adrian Faraday, Lancaster University. Thanks. I like your map. One of the things, there are two kind of dimensions I want you to comment on whether they're interesting. One is whether the discourse is moving over time in the different communities. So with sustainable HCI, for example, it's gone from like very behavioral change, which will be in one quadrant, through to much more sort of system change, I think. And the other was whether, the visualization, everything's equally densely covered, and actually some of those might be sparse, or there might be areas where you feel there are actual answers and there's not much to be done versus open questions. So do you plan to look at any of those things in future work?
I think the time scale, it's a very good point. Honestly, we didn't discuss that. So I think it is very just and a good point. Definitely to be looked further, if we can introduce somehow like the third dimension to that scale. In terms of maturity, so I think the second is more about how mature some fields are in one position or the other one. I guess you can introduce color coding, but the idea of the tool is to foster discussions and to foster going further and looking or positioning ourselves, right, in terms of where we are standing in relationship to other communities. So I think maturity, like the question of the maturity, is like the next step, but it's not necessary. I don't feel that it is an important variable to put into the diagram, because it's the second step. After you put in, then you're going and you're asking yourself, okay, so how mature is there anything to be done, or actually it's already saturated, as you said.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Marianka, let's save your question for the panel, okay? Because we're going to run over. Also, all of you got to be a little quicker. Adrian always has his hand up first, so what else am I going to do? It was Maël, yes. We were second this time. So maybe I'll have to put a pause on Adrian for the next few rounds so other people get to ask the questions quicker. I get to introduce Vijanti here. Welcome. Oh, first of all, sorry. Let's give another proper round of applause to the presenter. Really well done. And then, Vijanti, welcome. We're super excited to hear about the SDG goals in the IT sector from you.
Thank you, Birgit. So, welcome all. Good morning. My name is Vijanti Ramotar, and together with Sergio España, Mingwing, and Wasil El Yousfi, I wrote a paper called Sustainable Development Goals in the ICT Sector. We're all from Utrecht University. Here you see part of our campus, which is under construction. We have the largest gay bar pad in the world. So, you're all welcome to visit sometime.
We're back.
We're back. Good. So I'm going to be talking about the Sustainable Development Goals. I assume you all know the Sustainable Development Goals, but just as a recap, there are 17 goals that are produced by the United Nations, and they are a shared blueprint for peace and prosperity for the planet and people. All United Nations members committed to these goals, and the goals are very broad, from no poverty to climate action, and some might be contradicting. We're not here to discuss the SDG framework or comment on it. We're going to see how companies actually use this framework. But first, I would like to know, what are your favorite SDGs, or what are the SDGs that you find most important or resonate with you most? So please scan the QR or go to wooclap.com and use the event code. And just move the dot, press submit, and do that 3 times. Or if you think 4 are really important, do it 4 times. So you can see that someone finds climate action very important. I see someone in zero hunger. Personally, the one that really resonates with me is reduced inequalities, because I get really angry when I hear about inequalities. So just go ahead and do that. Now, while I continue with my presentation, and in the end, we'll look back at it. Oh, yeah, sure. Go ahead. I'll give you a couple more seconds. Yes? Okay. I'm going to continue, and we'll circle back to that towards the end of the presentation. So what some of you did and what some of you are currently doing is what companies also have to do. They have to decide which SDGs are most important to them or what SDGs they will focus on. And there are certain methods that can help companies decide which activities to or which goals to focus on, how to formulate effective SDG strategies, and provide comprehensive guidelines on how to systematically assess their impacts on the SDGs. And these methods are developed by networks that know a lot about sustainability accounting and reporting, such as the Global Reporting Initiative, the UN Global Compact, or B-Lab from the B Corp movement. And some of these methods that we found are the SDG Compass, the Action Manager. Maybe you've heard of a couple of them. But they avoid cherry picking. They, well, I cannot say that they completely avoid greenwashing or SDG washing, but at least they mitigate the risk of these practices. So these methods are really important when reporting on the SDGs. We really wanted to understand these methods. So what we did is we created models that show what the process of the SDGs look like, which you can see on the left side, and the data structure of these methods. And we did that for all 6 methods that we found. And then we compared the methods. And in the end, we found that generally there are 13 activities that companies should perform in order to report on the SDGs effectively. So to assess their impact and report on it effectively. So they start by understanding the SDGs, then they map their value chain to see what SDGs they have impacts on, and they select some KPIs, collect data. Of course, they also set a timeline for when they would have to when they would like to have achieved certain goals. They create an action plan, and in the end, they write a report. So I will not discuss all 13 activities. If you're interested in this, please read the paper. But in general, this is what companies should do in order to assess their performance and write a good report. So that's what the theory looks like, what should happen in theory. And now we're interested in what companies do in practice. So we looked at 25 of the biggest ICT companies. We used earlier research from Deroche and, well, Elstadter. And we took the list that they used in their research and we updated it. And we checked for each of the companies whether they actually did some SDG reporting. And a side note here, it's not better or worse when you do or do not report on SDGs, because the SDGs are just a framework for sustainability accounting. You could basically use any framework. So across there doesn't necessarily mean anything negative. But we found that some companies do use the SDGs, and then we checked whether they used an SDG method, the ones that I just showed you, or another one that was not in the scope of the research. But we found that, unfortunately, none of these companies use any SDG method. So, well, you can feel it already. They can do cherry picking, they can do SDG washing, because they don't use a method to systematically assess their performance. We also checked the number of SDGs that they report on, and this ranges from 4 to 17, so also great variety there. We selected 6 of these companies to look more in depth in what they do. And for, so we selected Apple, Cisco, Dell, Meta, HP, and Microsoft. And for 6 companies, we created these tables. So we used a coding program, and we coded for each of the SDGs positive impacts that they report and negative impacts that they report. So let's have a closer look. So the tables are quite long, and we have 2 of these tables. And let's have a look at what it says in the tables. So for instance, for SDG 6, HP says, well, we reduced potable water withdrawal, and they have some numbers there to back that up. Then Dell says we reduced fresh water usage, and Apple says, let's see, we use our water more efficiently. So we try to maintain the terminology that they use in their reports. But they all do a similar action for SDG 6. You can see that Apple has some more activities or some more actions than the other 2. And we also coded negative actions For instance, HP reports that there are fewer girls and women in or underrepresented groups in their education initiatives. So we did that for all 6 companies. And we aggregated the data, which you can see here in the table. And we found that Meta reports on the least number of SDGs. Microsoft, Cisco, and Apple report on all 17. We also looked at a number of positive impacts that they report. That ranges from 21 to 85. So great variety there. And a number of negative impacts. And interesting here is that some report 0 negative impacts, while they for sure have negative impacts. And even the ones that do report negative impacts only report a few, and that's very disproportionate to the number of positive impacts. We also checked whether we could verify the actions that they report. So can we find any raw data tables or testimonies from people who participated in programs or initiatives? Or could we find that certain plans are audited and assured by third-party companies? Of course, we only looked at publicly available proof, and we found that for Meta, for instance, the publicly available proof is very low, and for Cisco, it was quite high. They actually included it in their report, so that was very nice, 94%. Sorry. Let's see what you did. Let's see what you found very interesting, what you found very important. Okay, so I see that there's quite a division on SDGs that you find important. Clean water and sanitation is not super important to you, maybe because I forgot to put water on the slide. Also, decent work and economic growth is not a priority for you. But this is really interesting to see that you chose this variety of important SDGs. Let's have a look at what the companies did. So here you see for all of the companies, one block represents an action that they took. So the companies mostly focus on gender equality, decent work, and economic growth, which is natural because they're companies, so they are interested in creating decent work. Let's have a look at a bit of a more comprehensive overview. Here you can see that indeed Microsoft, Apple, they reported most actions, and SDGs 5, 8, 12, and 13 are the ones that they mostly contribute to, according to them, at least, in a positive way. So let's move over to the key findings. We found that the biggest ICT companies, they do not use any designated SDG method to assess their performance and report on this. Moreover, the SDGs that they do spend most attention on are 5, 8, 12, and 13. We could only verify whether the actions that they report are true in 62% of the cases, so that's the average of all of the proof percentages. The number of SDGs that they report on range from 4 to 17. And most companies, unfortunately, only report positive impacts, and they leave the negative impacts completely undiscussed and undisputed. So with this work, we hope to inspire ICT companies to improve their efforts in sustainable development and open new research avenues on the application of SDGs, of the SDGs framework within and outside the ICT sector. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. I'm always honored when there is something that picks up our earlier work. Thanks a lot. I have a question here by Lorenz and then one by Dog.
Yes, thank you very much for this insight. Clarification question. To what extent did the targets play a role? I'm asking because as long as you are talking about the 17 SDGs, it's like citing from the Bible. You always find something to justify your action. And, and if you go down to the targets, it becomes more clear and difficult to make meaningful statements. So
Definitely, yeah, I completely agree with that. We saw a variety in how the targets are being used. In some reports, such as the one from Cisco, which was quite detailed, the targets are actually stated, and they state to what extent they want to contribute to those targets, the timeline for when they want to achieve certain targets. But for some reports like Meta, they just put the SDG on top and say, yeah, this is what we do. And yeah, so there's definitely variety in that. We did not check that, but that's really good suggestion, which we could do for follow-up research, definitely. Yeah.
Dag Lundén from Telia. Just wondering, maybe I missed that one, but clarification. This is based on only public reported information, not anything that you have been digging into, because there might be companies that has a methodology to report SDGs, but are not revealing it in the annual reports and so forth.
Yes, indeed. So we only looked at publicly available information. It could be that they tailor-made a method that is actually quite rigorous. Because, for instance, what we saw in the Cisco report is that there is a lot of proof. They use the targets, they set timelines. So probably they have a pretty solid tailor-made method. We could not get in contact with any one of these companies to validate this, but you can clearly see that there's a difference in the way of reporting. And yeah. So definitely, it's not just that they don't use any of the methods that are in the scope of this research, but there's probably an underlying method, and some are more rigorous than others. Yeah.
Right. Thank you so much. So we're going to move on to the next presenter. I did see your hand. We're going to save it for the panel. Thank you so much. Give her another warm round of applause, Vivanti. Perfect. So how many of you have been carpooling at least a few times in your life? Good. How many of you have had thoughts like, oh man, that person is late again. Birgit always needs to go pee after half an hour. There are some inconveniences that come with it. So our next presenter is going to show us a study on, is carpooling really worth it? In, very simple words. I'm very curious about your assessment, the potential of carpooling. Thank you, Aina.
Thank you. The image is stretched, but okay, I will continue if you can change during the presentation. It's okay. So I'm Aina. I will present. So I will talk about the potential of carpooling for reducing how much distance we travel by car. I'm a PhD student in third year in Grenoble. So I will start with a bit of context. In France, the transport sector, among the other, represents 1/3 of the total GHG emissions in the territory. And in the French National Low Carbon Strategy, that is the SNBC in French, which is the official strategy to reach the goal fixed by the Paris Agreement. In this strategy, we plan to reach a quasi-decarbonation in 2050. To do this, one part of the strategy is the carpooling for the local mobility. So we can read it in the official strategy, but also in some technical documents that support this strategy. Here we can see that there is even a goal of reaching 1.75 person per vehicle before 2050. And in practice, you can see that, for example, this year, there is an incentive for participating in one of the digital carpooling platforms here. So it's really targeted to improving the role of digital carpooling platform. This goal of person per vehicle has been derived for the Grenoble local transportation plan. So we are in Rennes here, as you know. Grenoble is here in the French Alps. And there the objective is to reach an average occupancy rate of 1.4 for the commute flows between the metropolis center and the countryside. So the flow with a road there. And if I want to express that in goals of vehicle kilometer traveled, so we say VKT, that means reducing the distance traveled by 24%. So that leads to our research question: can daily carpooling help meet the vehicle occupancy goal targeted by this plan in Grenoble? In other words, can ICT through the digital carpooling platform help meet this goal? We try to answer this with three contributions. Third, the methodology to evaluate a potential for the daily carpooling for reducing VKT. Then an open source tool implementing this methodology and an estimate for this potential in the Grenoble area. So roughly speaking, we generate, so to do our approach is generating first population with the associated travel demand, and then make this population carpooling. Assess how much avoided VKT we can get through the carpooling in this synthetic population. So the first step, just to detail a bit, we want a population with the schedule for each synthetic inhabitant and for an average working day. The challenge here is to be consistent with the data in input that are open and public survey results. And for the second stage that is computing the carpooling scenario, so we want to do this by maximizing the avoided VKT and taking into account the schedules of the synthetic population for each traveler. For example, if I go from home to work at the morning by carpooling, I cannot take my car for returning back to home. So we do that, for example, by tracking the vehicle location. The challenge here is the scalability, but I won't detail this today. So there are more data in the paper, or you can ask questions also. The advantage of our approach is the genericity. So in particular, we can handle different carpooling schemes, and it is easily adaptable to other areas in France. So about area in France, so as I said before, I focus on the Grenoble area. So on the left, this is all the synthetic trips we can get with the software. So this is an area that is greater than 6,000 kilometers square with a population of more than 600,000 people. And for them, we compute carpooling teams by gathering solo driver and by preserving people's schedules, which we make them carpooling for two carpooling schemes in this case study. The first one is the identical carpooling scheme. We call it the scheme where people can carpool together if the origin are the same or almost the same, close enough, we said, and the destination are also close enough, and the inclusive carpooling where people can be picked up or dropped off along the path of a driver path. So I said close enough, that means two parameters we have to fix, that are the time constraint and the space constraint. So that means how much flexibility I have in my schedules or around my home or workplace to get to a carpooling vehicle. And we have two other parameters that are the vehicle capacity, so the number of passengers that can go into a vehicle, so plus the driver, that is also someone who want to go to work or to home, and an adoption rate. By this parameter, we wanted to model the fact that not everybody participates into a carpooling service. So this is the number of solo drivers that we want to participate. This is a parameter between 0 and 100%. So these are the all kind of results we can get if we vary each of the parameters. I won't detail this either, but I will focus on one scenario for one parameter, that is the effect of the adoption rate on the selected commute flow I spoke about just before. So the commute flow are the one between the metropolis and the countryside. On this graph, you can see on the x-axis, so the adoption rate between 0 and 100%, and on the axis, there is the avoided VKT. On the left, in million of kilometers, and on the right, as a share in percentage of the commuter flow, of the commuting VKT. And the other parameters are fixed with very optimistic settings. So this is the maximum settings we can get to have a sort of maximization. And just if you remind, there is this occupancy goal. It is equivalent to avoid 24% of the commute VKT. And if you look on the figure, that means that more than 55% of the current commuter need to participate in the carpooling service to reach this avoided commute VKT goal. And that is a lot. That means that if based only on daily carpooling of the solo driver, meeting this goal means fast and massive change. If you remember, this is before 2030. So we have still some limitations. Uncertainties are dependent on the travel demand synthesis. So we still need to check that. And we also consider a fixed travel demand, whereas carpooling can influence mobility a bit. So I can I could change my schedule to match other people's schedule to be able to carpool. And the travel demand will probably evolve by 2050. So we didn't take this into account. So for the future work, we need to consolidate the methodology by checking, as I just said, the travel demand synthesis and uncertainties with respect to the carpooling analysis, compare the result with other types of model, sort of validation of our model, and we also want to broaden the scope of the study. So comparing the potential of the carpooling with other levers, like modal shift to bike and public transportations, we already have some result on this. So we can say, this is preliminary result, but from this we can see that I think half of carpoolable trip can be done by bike, for example, just to see. And also another future work is that we want to study the effect of the evolution of the travel demand on our model and our results. So thank you for listening.
Thank you very much for this nice presentation. So, curious. Gentleman next to Adrian, whose name I don't know yet. So please introduce yourself and give us your question.
Thank you. So I'm François from University of Rennes. So thanks a lot for your talk. My question relates to the possible obstacles to carpooling. Do you know of any research of why people might not want to carpool, and which would inform on how to do the drastic and important changes that you mentioned?
Our study show what are the structural obstacles for. Structural obstacles are where do people live, where do they work, what are the schedules. So this is the first obstacle. Then, I do not really know how is the other study because it's still in progress. So it's not mine. It's more side of social studies and studies from the organizer of the mobility that are still doing that. So I don't have more info on that.
Maybe it has to do with the informal reasons that I gave before the presentation. Let's see, Maël.
Hi, yeah. So Maël from Toulouse University. I was just wondering, quickly, can you explain? Like, I don't really understand this the simulator or something that you built. So, what are the inputs? What are the outputs? Like, what is it that we can use it for?
So I go back on this, or maybe. So there is two parts in our modelization. So the first part is a travel demand synthesis. This one taking in inputs. So basically, public statistics. So everything is open, and our software is also open source. So you can use this to generate a population with the travel demand. And then we added a part in this model from this synthetic population and travel demand, to compute the maximum, the potential maximum avoided VKT we can have with the selected carpooling schemes.
Thank you so much. Let's thank our presenter again. We'll save further questions. I'm sure there will be plenty more questions. For now, we're going to move on to the fourth presentation. Who of you has been to a good virtual conference? Still too far away? Okay. So the question was, who of you has been to a good virtual conference? Perfect. Who of you has been to a good hybrid conference? Cool. So it is doable. Yes, it is. It takes quite a bit of effort. There are lots of social and environmental effects, and we're going to learn a lot about that now. So
Yes,
welcome, Dennis, to the stage. And what we're going to need is to move this to the other screen. So if you can go to the screen settings, then you can move from duplicate screen to from extend screen to duplicate screen. So in your settings. As you know, this was the one presentation where we didn't get to try it out before. It's like an umbrella. So when you go to the monitors. Copy. Luckily, the session chair has been a Mac user herself for quite a while, so we're able to fix that thing. Back to the slides and over to you. So thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, and sorry for this. So this presentation was done in common with international team with Brazilian postdoc Danilo and the Polish colleague Krzysztof and Leonel coming from Lisbon. And a bit of context for motivating this. I'm coming from the HPC community, I mean high performance computing, and now I'm doing some frugal machine learning. And this gives you some insight about what is Europar. Okay, so Europar is a conference that is well known and run for a while, and it deals with some parallel and distributed technology. It's a tech conference. And during the pandemic, actually, we had two consecutive virtual editions of this conference. And you can see here some e-trends in Europe. In 2020, we were in Warsaw, and you can see here origin of the participant of the conference. And mainly they were coming from Poland, as you can see here, and Germany, even if it was in virtual. So there are some people came physically, probably. And in 2021, in Lisbon, then distribution were a bit different. So many people from France and also from the US. And, okay, so this is a different view of the people who attend. And the main questioning here was, it's not my main topic, but I was very interested in taking the opportunity of the pandemic and these virtual things to open the door of the debate on environmental issues in my community. And then I discussed with the two chairs of the previous virtual conferences, and they give me all data. Actually, just something also, I was the chair of this conference in 2016, and then I knew I was entering the steering committee, and the steering committee is getting old. And so I was in the steering committee, but I resigned because they need some fresh blood. And because it's very old, actually. The average of... Okay. And there was only one female colleague. Okay, so they did not take the opportunity to refresh too much, but okay. And they were not very interested in this topic. Okay, now what we did, we took some existing models, so nothing really new. We just adapted, and I will tell you in one extent. And this is the 3 tiers usual way to do this. We focus on servers, network, and all the other devices. Okay, and we based this study on similar works that were done from the astronomy conference, a big one, and some other models on streaming. Probably you know very well, some of you obviously, these tools. And what we did is to also is to consider the energetic mix of the country. That is quite different depending on the country. Okay, so this is the mix, the energetic mix. So we have a tool in France with RTE, but okay, we use this data. And now the methodology here was mainly to focus on the travel. Why? Because in most of the data that we knew, there was the main part was really the big part, as you will see, is coming from the travels. And we tried to have a lot of models, and we extracted from this model pessimistic model and optimistic model, just in order to have an interval of what could be done. So here are the data that we obtained. Again, this was given by the organizers. And you can see here the consumption over. So this is here per participant, per capita. And you can see a zoom of the, I don't know if you see very well here, at the very beginning here, on the left side of the chart. And if we know what we are interested in, the cumulative effect, and here you can see the cumulative effect on the conference in Warsaw. And it's actually a lot of equivalent of tons in CO2 emissions. And the same for Lisbon here. It's a bit less, but still important. And you can see here in these curves that you have some accumulation here by, groups of people probably. You can guess where they are coming from. Okay, same on this chart. So now here are the results. So we did not expect so big difference actually. But here you can see both in the chart, both conferences in 2021 and 2020, with the pessimistic and optimistic scenario. They are pure estimated emissions, and then we give the equivalent of US homes energy use per year, just to give an idea. And the equivalent, or with another way to compare, with the equivalent of carbon sequestered by square meter, again in the US. in 1 year. It gives you some different view of the same numbers. And okay, you can see that in both cases we more or less had about the same. So there were about 200 people there connected. And in virtual here, we run several models here, 2 models per pessimistic and optimistic model per venue. And here you have the differences. I'm almost done. And you have the laptop, network, servers, and the total here. We just gave the equivalent of carbon sequestrated by square meter. So you can see here that there are a lot of differences, several order of magnitudes. Okay, so here no choice. Virtual is far better. Okay, so here is the analysis. So according to most other studies, similar studies, so the in-person conferences emissions are due to traveling. So we had a question yesterday, about catering and whatever, or hotel. So it's not very important. The main is traveling. And obviously here virtual is much better. I don't want to give any advice about this conference. Let's see after. Okay. So, but there are also our positive impact, and this is here where I would like to open the discussion with you, because all this study was purely scientific study somehow, because we had to talk with people who are very in the tech. But actually here we have a lot of benefits to be physically all together, obviously. A lot of, growing or building our network for the youngest, and or to exchange between us, obviously. And actually here the problem is how to quantify this effect here, because the people of my community, they need numbers, they need measures, so it's very hard to discuss with them about this. So what we did is to open. I had a slot on the 22 conference last year, and we had the opportunity to open a chat that was open for several days just after my presentation. And then we had a lot of people who contributed to this. So it's a very qualitative. I'm not very familiar with this kind of thing, but at least we received several tens of comments, and only a few people reply, but they reply in deep with many details. And here, what to do with this kind of results? So obviously, I would like to open the discussion with my community. The idea is not to say it's good to go virtual or not, but it's a way to open the discussion on the topic of environmental issues. Okay, so what we propose here is maybe to use these kind of tools as a way to select the hosting place, because depending on the place, the virtual cost is not exactly the same. We have also some ideas of running multi-hub events, because probably here, as you can see in the results, the contribution of this travel was mainly done by people who are in continental flights. And what we can do here is to use some incentive, and we have to reduce cost and to increase the benefits of being physically present at the conference. And we can think about free registration for those who travel by train. This is something that I open. They don't really agree, I guess. And to extend the research stays. This was done in another conference in France, in ICALP. It's good if you can show that you are visiting also another lab in France, let's say the venue is in France, then they can offer, it's a good way to offer free registration. And some ideas like this, we have many others. If you want, we can share this. Okay, so I'm done.
Thank you very much. That was really insightful. I'm curious about the industry sponsors we have to pick up for the free registrations to make those possible. I'm all for it. We have a lot of train travelers here, I do know that. We have time for 1-2 questions, and then we'll move into the panel. So presenters, you get ready. Aina, I'm going to have your question in the panel, and you can ask directly.
Thank you very much for this really interesting presentation. My name is Daniel Sheen from the University of Bristol. I wanted to add a maybe slightly pessimistic comment to this, that really the numbers are telling a very clear story that virtual attendance is by far superior to when it comes to the carbon budget. Sadly, many of us, sadly, the alternatives to flying that we've got with train travel, sadly they aren't an order of magnitude better. Now there's uncertainty around the carbon footprint of flying, but within Europe, coming from the UK, for example, traveling to Central Europe, even with a train, it is even though it's lower than flying, it isn't a solution to the problem. So. Physical attendance is just really difficult to do on a low carbon budget.
Yes. What to add?
Agreed. What to add? So
I agree.
At ITZU for us, we've tried all the versions. We've done purely virtual, we've done hybrid, we've done in-person only. We have a new hybrid this year with streaming only. So we're excited to find out what next year is going to be like, which you're going to hear about tomorrow morning. Just a little preview to get you excited.
So maybe just to add, this is a matter of benefits over cost. So then you have, if you cannot decrease the cost, sorry, I'm a scientist, let's increase the benefits of being there physically, or to open to hybrid. So it's a way to.
All right. Matthias, and then Apo down here. And then may I invite the other presenters to come up on stage for the panel, please?
Thanks, very interesting, and we will see what we can do with Stockholm not being that travel-friendly for most people, but with some planning, it's possible to go there by train as well. But I was thinking, have you been looking into different policies? I think you mentioned it the laboratory, I didn't get exactly what it was you said, but we have at our university had some thoughts of some kind of restrictions on how much travel can, so we need to prioritize. And one thought that has been discussed is maybe it's the professors who need to stay because it's the PhD students who need to meet and those kinds, or maybe setting some kinds of limits so you do need to choose. If Dan absolutely must come to Rennes this year, that's the thing he does. But then do you have, how many of those things have you gone through in your work? Because it's very interesting.
Actually, this debate is open in France, in many labs, actually, including mine, but other labs also. So we have some easy chart where we can just remind the colleague or PhD students on the way to do you really need? If you need, could you go in another place and whatever. So you have a kind of decision tree for that helps, that is in cafeteria, for instance, that makes people aware of something, but obviously let people decide somehow. The idea to put a budget on CO2 and traveling is open, but not very popular, actually, but at least by team. So we are thinking about something like this. It's the start of this. So.
Thank you so much. Let's segue into the panel after giving our fourth presenter another round of applause. I took some notes. Maria Angela didn't get to ask a question earlier, so you get the first question now.
Thank you very
John.
Thank you. So my question was related to Anja, Asta, sorry, the first speaker, but I think it's applicable across the four panelists. How do you handle the redux effect of research? For example, in your case, you started from a complex model, the donut model, and then there was just the two columns environmental impact, and so the social impact and environmental impact. Very similar as well on the work on SDGs. You look at the 17 SDGs, but you didn't look at the specific of the target. And then as well in the last talk was looking at the social and environmental impact. So how do you manage the redux effect of academic research in such a complex problem, the sustainability?
You would like to take the question. Do you want to start?
Yeah, I guess I can. I think it's a very good question. And I think it could be also asked for psychologists or neuropsychologists, because it's the way we deal with the complexity and complication or complicated questions in our life. I think overall, as human beings, we struggle to deal with complex problems because they are huge. They are in the uncertain world, and by trying to reduce it the way we are trying, reduce it or simplify, we are trying to provide ways to a starting point, and then maybe to go bigger later on once we start talking with everything. Because I think I'm not the only one when you are looking at your research question at the beginning, you're like overwhelmed a lot of time because it looks so complicated, it looks so complex, but you have to start somewhere. And I think that would be my point of view. It's not necessary. At the same time, I'm not really sure. Sometimes I think we are overcomplicating things. We are overthinking, and sometimes the simplicity might be the solution, not always. But.
Yes, maybe I can add something about the keynote of this morning, actually, because something was related to this. Because we are talking with computer scientists or people who are in the tech, and people who are in the tech need numbers, and they have in mind some methodology, and we have really to open this and to break down all completely and to open. And we have to host in our lab some people who are thinking in different ways this systemic complexity. This is the only way to...
Was your question targeted for somebody specific? I just want to make sure you can... Yeah, all of them in theory, yeah. Yes, I think they all contribute, yes. Yeah, no, not all of you have to answer every single question. If you do ask a question and you have a specific presenter in mind, please ask towards them, and otherwise we'll see who would like to answer the question. So John gets the second question, and we have a bunch more hands up.
Okay, thank you. Jon Kroksti, NTNU Trondheim. Actually, to the first presenter, I was wondering first why you had introduced this new level of design, but then I see what you have on direct effect is really hardware effect. And then so you have then the software effect, so we kind of differentiated that, and that might be sensible. And then you should have areas like energy efficient computing systems as one area on the purely hardware. There's a lot of research that goes on there. What I miss in that, which I really like in what Birgit and those have made, is that they take into the technical sustainability also as part of it, because we are developing technical artifacts, and those are those that has worked in software engineering, and those areas we know that we have to do a lot of things to ensure that they don't crumble and it's not used and just become garbage. So that dimension I really feel is missing in the work that you're doing, and that overview. And very short to the second one, if you want to, I can try to get in contact with Cisco and Microsoft, for instance, to check if they can provide some more internal how they are doing things.
That would be great. So is that mainly a commentary, or is the question in there that I missed?
Okay, sorry. The question is, why did you introduce really this extra layer on the effects?
All right, the design. Okay, because in the original one, so we had direct effects or like life cycle effects, And the life cycle effects, it mainly comes out from the producing, manufacturing of a software of digital technology services, right? And actually, no, services, they are not really in the direct effects. And that's why the design effects, I think there's a lot of research communities which are look specifically or like way more, human-computer interaction, for example, right? You can't really say that they're dealing with direct effects. I would argue that's basically the reasoning behind is that there are some specific communities, I think direct effects becomes just too large if we try to also include design effects. And therefore, we can go, of course, into way bigger granularities at some point, either we go to very high level or very low level. But we thought that by introducing this additional level, which is give a little bit more in-depth view that the communities like green IT and human-computer interaction don't necessarily cover the same fields or don't necessarily always talk about the same things. But we can discuss that afterwards as well. I would be happy.
Thank you. Thank you. Question from the back.
So this is Daniela from Munich, from Technical University of Munich. I was wondering about the carpooling presentation. So how did you choose the technological solution for the problem? So I was wondering, did you also look at what are the reasons for people using individual passenger transport by car, and what are barriers for them not using it, and what technical solution could fulfill the needs they have? So did you look at that, and how did you choose looking especially into carpooling as a solution for this problem?
So actually, this is not us. So I and the other researcher that are proposing carpooling for answering the environmental problem. This is the strategies in the national strategies and also local strategies, I have said. And it was kind of counter modelization, like trying to assess if it is really possible to reach the goal given the solution given by the authority. So we didn't show the technology. We try to assess. Actually, we point a question, and the question is really, can ICT help? It's not which ICT help. It's not how can ICT help. It's can ICT help really? Is it necessary to have ICT to answer the sustainability goals?
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Gazelle.
Hello, Gazelle Shakeri, University of Oldenburg. I actually got very interested in Maria's question about reductive science, and then I was wondering, there is always a theme in scientific conferences, obviously, that we do the research, which is excellent, and then we present it, and then we're like, I'm done communicating, I'm done with this reductive piece of knowledge creation. And is there a way, do we take this piece of information and communicate it, do we put it back into context, into like the real world? Do we communicate it like Aista? Do we take your research and change science itself? Or Aina, do we take your research and like go and talk to the governments and like, hey, everybody has to carpool now? Or do we, I forgot your name, the last presenter, do we then take,
Dennis.
Yeah, do we take that and then go and change the conference the way we have conferences? Like, even though we do some sort of reductive science, or like just to take a component of a system and analyze that, do we then go and put it back into context? If we do, how do you do it? If we don't do it, how would you do it? Or do you want to do it? This is a question I have. Yeah, thank you.
Just a clarification on my presentation. The point was to show that it is actually difficult to only count on carpooling. It's not saying that everybody should carpooling. And on the overall questions, so no, I will just...
Well, I can answer from my side of point of view. One of the motivations, my personal motivation to do this work which we've done, right? It was, I'm a PhD student. When I came up with my question, or when I started looking into my domain, I started asking questions. Where is this standing in the bigger sense? I don't know, right? I don't know, and that's kind of coming into your question, right? So by answering my question, my PhD question, how I'm going to contribute to the bigger community, to the scientific community, where do I need to look in order to understand the theoretical underpinnings? I want to stand on the shoulders of somebody else who did already work, right? But I want to contribute and later on find some new things. So on my very short answer, yes, please do take the model and use it the way you see fit, to foster discussion, to go and look for more answers, to structure and to find maybe, as I did, for me it became way clearer where I'm standing as a PhD student with my question in terms of the discourse of ICT within sustainable development. So for me it helped, right, through this work. So I can only hope that it's going to be useful and it's going to help others. And it's not a prescriptive model what we are offering, right? It's just it's a framework which can evolve, which can be modified. You can take away design effects, add some other effects if you feel that it allows you better to grapple with the complexities of the research environment.
Thank you. So maybe another view at the other side of the spectrum because I'm rather at the end of the career now. And actually, I had some responsibility at the university also, and I'm sharing a research program also. But I think here there is the paradox between this top-down approach. And if we want to change something, even if we know, and even if it's assessed by some strong classical studies like what we did, it's very hard to impose something from the top. And I mean, probably the best way to do is to fertilize and to discuss with people from the little, PhD students, groups of students, group of colleagues in the lab, and so on. And this is, as soon as the ground is really fertilized by these ideas, they will grow. And probably this is the most efficient, I guess. And just another point is we also, us as academic researchers, to go out of our way to deliver the knowledge that we have. And this is, for the moment, when we would like to go to the society, to somewhere else, this is always us who decided. But we have to break this also, because we have to try to find some other ways to deliver our knowledge or something. This is not, we are those who knows, and the other, so we have to forget all this, I guess.
Thank you. Vijanti, did you want to add?
Yes, so I would like to say, indeed, we should take the results because the research is interesting, but more important is that the results are actually being used. So indeed, I should go to the companies and I should tell them, hey, this is what we found. Do you agree? Or do you keep some hidden information? And turns out that you're actually super sustainable, or this is how you could improve. So definitely, I will work on that part. In my usual research, I do information systems engineering for social enterprises. And in the Netherlands, we are in contact with many social enterprises, and we do encourage them to provide us feedback on what we're developing. So we are trying to encourage that valorization part in our research, and I think it's one of the most important aspects of the research. So that's what I briefly wanted to add.
Thank you. Yeah. One more question there, then you get to ask your question, then Daniel, and then the lady in the far corner in the back. We have a lot of questions here.
Hello,
Yes.
I'm Gauthier from RMIT. Oh, sorry for my voice. It was late night. I have a question for Aina. You say that the city of Grenoble came with the target of having a 1.4 occupancy rate per vehicle. Do you know what do they get this indicator from, or the target from? What are the models they're using to get that?
So we are in contact with the people creating this kind of strategy. And so I should know this actually. But I think they are using, no, I know they are using aggregated models. So not as we have done to model, to know how are the flows, the transportation flow between different zones of the map. And yeah, no, sorry, I cannot answer on this one.
You can tell me later if you want.
Yeah, I answer you later.
Yeah, let's go with that. Daniel. Oh, sorry, I promised Aiste she could ask her question first. Sorry. Thank you so much. I think that may have been a perfect, well, would you like to add something to that answer? Okay, she was applauding you. So I think that was a really nice wrap-up word for the panel. So thank you so much. Thank you to all the presenters. Thank you for all your good questions. I know there were many more hands up. Apologies that we couldn't fit all of you in. So if your question did not get answered, come down, pick your favorite presenter, serenade them to lunch with your question. And then especially the 4 presenters for the session after lunch, make sure you're back at 5 to 2 so we can check your slides before you come on stage. And all of you, enjoy your lunch break and come back here by 2.
Thank you. It was nice to